Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Inside the FLX. I'm Josh Durso, and as always, we are coming to you from the FingerLakes1.com studio in downtown Seneca Falls. Today we are joined by Steve Churchill of the Seneca County Board of Supervisors. Steve, thanks a lot for stopping by again. Second time on the show, I believe.
I think it's the third.
Possibly the second or third, one of the two. You've been around a couple
absolutely.
times.
Thanks for having me, Josh. We met in the parking lot last week at Sauter's, and I kind of put the bug in your ear to get back on the show, and I appreciate you getting me in this quick.
Definitely. So there are a lot of important things to talk about here in Seneca Falls right now. None more present, I guess, than the community forum that just happened last night on the proposed local law number 7. You were in attendance, quietly in attendance last night. What was your what has been your gut reaction to the forum as a whole?
Well, first of all, I was there. I was not there for the entire forum, and I did arrive late. I had some family obligations, so I was banded out into the hallway, but I listened in for about a half hour and then left. First and foremost, I think the forum itself was held in violation of the old open meetings law. Whenever you have a gathering of public officials, a quorum of public officials, that's a public meeting and needs to be advertised as such and opened, and minutes need to be recorded. And none of that occurred last night. That said, what does that mean? Well, it means that nothing that was said last night becomes the part of the public record. Mm-hmm. It wasn't recorded by the public government or the town council. And so whatever everybody spoke and said, it's just not part of the record. And that's kind of a shame. It also means that a lot of the folks that showed up last night may be reluctant to show up again a second time at the public hearing for local law number 7. And of course, the public hearing does count. That becomes part of the record regarding that debate on that law. And it's very important that people speak at that meeting. So from that perspective, I think it played into the hands of the landfill for the most part. I think it was a delay and stall tactic to convert it. There's even some question about how they did that, convert a public hearing essentially by, waving the magic wand to a public forum. I don't think could be done, done by a matter of one vote, but that's my understanding how it was done. So I was disappointed that it wasn't the public hearing. There was a good turnout. Again, I think we hear a lot of the same arguments over and over. We've been hearing a lot of these arguments for a lot of months this year, and for a lot of years over the past decade. So,
now, the landfilling debate as a whole, landfilling in the Finger Lakes, you haven't really shied away from the issue at all. For those who might be catching up, give us your sort of capsulized stance on landfilling in the Finger Lakes, local law number 7, and sort of how you approach that whole situation.
Seneca Falls is my home. I was born and grew up in Waterloo. I got a good education, and I moved to the suburbs of Seneca Falls back in the early 70s. But I've been here most of my life, and I love Seneca Falls, like so many of us. It's a beautiful town. It's a beautiful area. It's a wonderful community. And we have potentially a bright future, but I see the landfill and have seen it and watched it my entire life grow, and I have grave concerns, as so many others do. It's really not. I don't think it is a complicated issue, because I really think the landfill is about one thing, and that's money. If there weren't any money coming out of the landfill in the amounts that it does, and how it's got itself injected into so many things, I don't think there'd be a person in the community that would want it open any longer. Mm-hmm. It would have been closed a long time ago. But the money is the only reason it exists. It's the nature of the business. It's the nature of that beast. But without knowing when it's going to close, I mean, it looks like the way it's going to go, it's going to outlive me. So, in other words, I was born in the 50s, and that's when the Tantella landfill was first constructed out there.
Right.
and I'll probably die, in the next 20 years, and I'll bet you the landfill's still here, unless we close it now. We have a window of opportunity. We don't need more money from the landfill. That's only going to make it harder. I think we're at that point where we could still wean ourselves off it, and we would survive. I mean, we have Del Lago coming in now. The county's talking about sharing some tax revenues. We're going to be getting an influx of money from the Del Lago development. If nothing, if no more or no less than just treating the wastewater and the sewage from that 318 corridor. That's going to put a bunch of money into the Seneca Falls coffer. So there's some new money coming in. $2.4 million seems daunting to a lot of people. It's really not. And I might be getting ahead, and you can interrupt me, but I'm going to throw this out there. $2.4 million. There are over 4,000 parcels, taxable parcels, in the town of Seneca Falls. And if you do the math, if we had no new monies coming in to offset that $2.4 million, and we were just to pick up that burden, and if you came up with a formula, just split it amongst those 4,000 parcels, that price tag is $1.64 a day. It's less than the cost of a cup of coffee or a slice of pizza or a school lunch for a kid. It's less than that, and people are absolutely insane about the possibility of taking on that burden. So when you think about it, less than a cup of coffee to close the landfill, and the $2.4 million is paid. I'm willing to do it. And stop me if I'm going too fast, but I gave you a piece of paper because I want to explain the tax situation another way, and that's this. And this applies more to the people in the village, which is the bulk of Seneca Falls, are the village residents. But in 2011, pre-dissolution, this village still existed. $100,000 home that was assessed for $100,000 in the village. Their tax liability was approximately $4,500. The village tax was incredible. It was $15 plus per thousand. Well, the village dissolved. That went away. There was zero town tax, by the way, back in 2011. So now we have a town. The town tax rate is $5.24. That's a third of what it was in 2011. So what does that mean? It means that all those folks that lived in the village, their tax rate went down. Their tax liability went down significantly. $100,000 home whose burden was $4,500 in 2011. Their tax burden today, or in 2015, was $3,500. It went down $1,000.
Right.
But what's important here, that's their total tax liability. What's important here is that their town tax today is $524. It's $524. So even if their town tax were to double, their total tax liability would be $4,000, which is still $500 less than where they were in 2011. So in other words, the sky is not falling, and that's not taking into consideration any new tax revenues, no new tax. That's not taking into consideration any cuts in spending, and I like to believe that in this town we could cut 3 or 4%. We don't have to kill ourselves, but there's certainly ways that we can save money, and perhaps if we close the dump, we can bring in some businesses to bolster our tax base.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned that I thought was interesting, and it's been discussed now for several months, sort of behind the scenes, out openly, all of the above, sales tax sharing in Seneca County. It seems like it's gaining a little bit of steam or a little bit of momentum at the county level. Talk to us as a member of that county board. Where do you feel the needle is on that? Is it being well received? Is it, if it were pushed a little harder, do you think it would be successful?
Absolutely. I mean, it was presented to the board 2 years ago, I believe, the first time, and it wasn't well received. Although at that time I was in favor of considering it. I thought it had merit and it should be considered by the full board. But the full board, the sense was, and it was pretty strong, that it just didn't want to be considered. So it wasn't discussed. So it's been sitting out there festering. The board has changed a little bit. Actually, I asked Cindy Garlick-Lorenzetti to put it on her committee agenda to be discussed under government ops, and it was this past Tuesday. And a number of the town supervisors spoke up in support of it. I think the votes are there to pass, and it passed unanimously in committee, and that is to look at some sort of formula of revenue sharing. Most of the counties in New York State, the vast majority, I think almost all of them, have some sort of sales tax revenue sharing, or at least county revenue sharing with their townships. The plan that was proposed a couple years ago, I think, really gives us a good foundation, and we'll probably have something that's very similar or modeled on that plan. And the plan is very simple. It's that the county would set essentially a high water mark. The county takes in approximately $24 million sales tax revenues every year, mostly generated from the outlet mall and some of that.
Right.
So it's easy for anybody to see that when Del Lago comes on board, and the 318 corridor will most certainly develop over the next 10 years, that there's going to be new sources of sales tax revenue, and that's what we're talking about here. So the plan is that if today we take in $23 million, that'll be the high water mark. In other words, that we will never take, as we take in more sales tax revenue, the county will never go below that level.
Right.
But above that water mark, that's considered new sales tax revenue. And the proposal was that whatever that amount is, say the first year we take in $30 million. I think that's way high, but say it's $30 million, and the difference was $5 million. The proposal is that then that new tax dollars would be split in half going to the county, and then the other half would be split amongst the towns. I think that's how it's split amongst the towns is probably.
I was going to say, would that in a weighted situation, or sort of, or just a straight up bread slice, kind of equal parts all the way around?
That's where the debate will be had. So there's been a request to create a little ad hoc committee to kind of look at some various options to present to the board.
So it sounds like what you're saying, the debate is more about how rather than if.
Correct.
Okay.
I would agree with that. Now, the vote hasn't been taken on the full board, so I can't speak for the board, but I think there's a lot of support for it.
Right.
And it just makes sense. I mean, the towns in our county, some of them, most of them, they have very little means to raise revenues. They can hope businesses come in, they can hope tourism and property taxes. But there's no way for them to really increase their bottom line. So today, we're going to see some new tax dollars coming out there, and there's no reason not to share it. All the communities have infrastructure issues. They have bills to pay. They have the same issues that any town faces. So I think it's a great idea. It only betters our entire county.
Now, how does essentially what you're talking about are a lot of moving pieces on the financial side, whether it's a town like Seneca Falls with money coming from Seneca Meadows, or whether it's the county working on a budget that has to stay within a reasonable space. What are sort of the principles that you think are trying to be applied across the board, or should be applied, to keep the ship from sinking in a proverbial sense?
We're talking about Seneca Falls?
Seneca Falls and the county, for that matter, because I think the spending debate is across the board.
I think our county's in good shape. Better than most counties, rural counties, and counties in upstate New York. I think we're in good shape. We've done a good job. We've held the taxes flat. Del Lago, from a financial standpoint, is a godsend. Whether you agree with gambling or the other issues surrounding Del Lago. Not a gambler myself, but I think it is good for the county. It's certainly going to bring in some needed income. It's going to bring some other issues as well. It's going to bring in some costs. But I think the county's in pretty good shape. Seneca Falls, on the other hand, has an addiction. And that's to the money stream out of the landfill. And it's really a shame that in the past, I think it's really been in about the past 10 years that that money coming from the landfill has really become such an integral part of the budget. But we aren't in too deep and we aren't in too far. And the scare tactics, I brought these in because, I just want to say shame on Seneca Meadows, really, for this. This really is. I mean, if this is a community partner to instill fear into people is shameful. And I understand how and why these instill fear. They're big dollar amounts on there, but almost every one of these, I can speak to a couple of them. I would question the sales tax paid on this one, because for all they were under the IDA, they were sales tax exempt for about the last 8 to 10 years. I believe that exemption expired this year in June, but this says in 2015 they paid $414,000 in sales tax. Well, if they were sales tax exempt, I'd like to discuss that. Okay, right. And that's the other thing. We don't know what's behind these numbers.
Exactly.
We know the 2.4 million. That's the one we're all familiar with, and I think I explained it. We can get, for a cup of coffee a day, we can make that go away. And one thing I didn't explain in my scenario too is the folks in the village will, if their town tax doubled, they would be shy of where they were in 2011 by about 50%.
Yeah.
Okay. The people in the town, which includes me, in 2000, when the village dissolved, I saw people in the town saw a real tax increase. Okay, the people in the village saw a huge decrease. We saw a tax increase. So if my village tax or town tax now were to double, I would see a second increase. So for the people of the town, it is a little scarier. Okay, we get hit again, but you know what? Hit me. I'll take it. I'll take it for to save my town and to save our children and to preserve our future. I'll pay it. I'll pay that cup of coffee a day.
Now, I guess what it really comes down to is, what is your gut feeling in terms of will Seneca Falls will this town board or any town board inevitably act on a local law?
I'm hoping. We have 3 folks on the town board now, I think, that really support having the public hearing and enacting a law. Now, if it has some amendments and some modifications, I think that that would be okay. I mean, first and foremost, we should get a law in the books that says no new landfills, and that's the first part of this. And that's pretty simple. Most of the towns in Seneca County have laws on the books. They put them on the They put them on the books back in the 80s when the DEC consolidated the small little dumps that all towns had into these mega landfills. So they put laws on the books to prevent any new landfills or dumps from opening. Seneca Falls didn't do that. They didn't do it then because we had a dump. But we need to have a law in the book that says that. That's plain and simple. No new landfills. And I think everybody's behind that.
Right.
It's the no new landfill expansions that's really the controversy. But there are exceptions in the current law that would allow Seneca Meadows to continue to operate as long as they have a DEC operating permit.
Right.
They have one today. It expires in 2017. They filed for a renewal. And if the DEC grants them a renewal, it may not be 10 years. I hope it's not. I hope it's much shorter. But if they grant them a renewal, then they would be able to, one would expire at midnight and the new one would. So I guess if the argument is that in that split second they don't have an operating permit, they got to close, I think that's unrealistic. Personally, the way I interpret the law is Seneca Meadow has an exception. Now, can they? But what I'd like to see is this: they currently have a new large cell opened on the east side here along 414. I think we've all seen it. They've been constructing it over the past couple years, and they're now filling it. The one on Black Brook, they closed a little bit prematurely because the mountain got out of control, and that's why we were experiencing tremendous odors last year. So they've drilled a series of vertical wells, which I think they didn't necessarily intend on drilling or having to drill yet. They're putting a plastic liner over the top to get a handle and try to capture the gases. But for all intents and purposes, they moved all the operation over to this new cell. Well, the cell on the western side along Black Brook Road took about 5 years to fill. From what I can assess, the one that we have currently being filled along 414 is smaller than that Black Brook cell. So I would expect that it's probably going to be filled in about 4 years, probably by 2020. So what I would like to, what I stand behind is, let's let them operate till 2020. Let's let them. What I say is one and done. The agreement I'd like to see is that no new cells. Don't start building a new cell because they start them a couple years ahead of time. Don't buy any new liner material. You're not going to need it. Let's finish up this one cell, close it, and we're done. That's 3 years before 2023. It's 5 years before 2025, and it's 7 years before the operating permit extension that Seneca Meadows is looking for to 2027. But let's one and done. I don't think you can leave essentially an unfilled liner there. I think you probably want to fill it, unfortunately, turn it into hill and close it properly. So I think that, to me, if there's a compromise out there, it's that. But we need to have a firm commitment and a closing date. The DEC has to agree to it, the town has to agree to it, the landfill has to agree to it, and all the people really need to agree to it. But I say one and done. Finish the cell, no more. That gives us a number of years. It gives us a few more years.
Now, last night it was mentioned that by one of the speakers, and I can't recall who it was specifically, but it's been mentioned multiple times in the press and in the coverage of this story, that this election for these town council members who are up in November, who were appointed earlier this year, could theoretically sort of become a referendum vote. There isn't a referendum vote on the landfill. There cannot be a referendum vote on the landfill. However, the candidates have very clear positions, or people perceived perception, I guess, of where people land on it.
Sure.
Do you think that's the way it's going to play out? That it will reflect where the community lands on the landfilling issue?
Absolutely. And I think for anybody to read it or interpret it any different would just be fooling themselves. Yeah, we have two candidates, Mary Saratori and Annette Lutz, who are on the side of clearly, continuing to ponder and consider the issue, and most likely to pass a local law. I think they're both pretty much in favor of that. The other two candidates, who I don't know personally, and I haven't heard from them personally, their position, I think, are essentially landfill candidates. So what will happen if those two folks win, and we haven't had the public hearing prior to Election Day? We still have time. What I'd like to see the town government do at its meeting next week is to re-announce the public hearing, because that has to be, there's a certain given amount of time where that has to be advertised, and we have the public hearing before the election, because once those, and there's still a little bit more time. I mean, the folks that we have on the board are there till the end of the year, December 31st. But the plan from the landfill, I'm sure, and I think from some on the town council, is to just keep postponing this. You get some new folks on the board, and there won't be a vote. There would not be a vote to have a public hearing, and if without a public hearing, there's no local law. And it's put away for a while. So that's that plan. So how the election turns out absolutely is about the future of the landfill.
Now, switching gears for a second here, it was announced that I believe one of the last two Seneca Falls Town Board meetings that you are doing some work at the new municipal building on Ovid Street. You and your company, your small business hat, back on. Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing, what that work is like, and what you're seeing as you're moving through that project.
All right. Well, yeah, we Stoneboat Computing, which I am the owner, and reside down at the bottom, just a stone throw from here down at the bottom of Water Street. We won a proposal, we're awarded a proposal to facilitate the moving of the PD and the town offices into the new town building. What does that move mean? I mean, we aren't moving the furniture, we're moving all the information technology, infrastructure, setting up the network, setting up the Wi-Fi, setting up the servers, setting up the phone systems. We have a lot of work ahead of us. I'm still, we haven't really got engaged. There has been some issues with the building, but I was told in a meeting just yesterday that it looks like the target to move in is by the middle of November. That's the hope.
Of November.
Yeah. That may be a little ambitious, but that's the target.
I was going to say, that was my follow-up question. Do you think that's tenable? Do you think that's something that can really be reached? Because that's about a month and a half-ish at this point.
Yeah, I think it can. I mean, furniture is not in yet. That's kind of a big determining factor. Mm-hmm. We have yet to order some equipment. We're waiting for a check to be cut by the town so we can order equipment. And we can get our work done in pretty short order. It's all about planning and testing. So the other thing that we're considering is that perhaps we move one of the facilities at a different point in time than the other. Perhaps the PD comes over sooner than the...
Right.
But there are a lot of other third-party vendors that coordination has to be done with. The PD uses Finger Lakes Communication. It's a company out of Auburn. They manage the radio systems, things like that. So we have to coordinate with some of those vendors. But we finally got telephone and internet services in the building, so they're ready to go. Like I say, once we start staging some equipment over there, I think things will start to go pretty fast.
Now, have there been any surprises along the way, anything that sort of caught you off guard, or has it just pretty much been a smooth process thus far? Early stages.
It's been pretty smooth.
Yep.
It really has. I mean, I've been working with Frank Turo and John Condino, those guys are both great to work with. All the folks in the town, certainly the employees are. I know most of them. Did a little work for them a number of years ago, so I think they're happy to have Stoneboat back, mm-hmm. And I think we're going to do a great job for them.
Now,
and we're saving the town a lot of money. I mean, there weren't a whole lot of proposals that come in, but I can say this, that we were certainly we were the lowest.
Mm-hmm. Which is always good for
Absolutely.
Anyone mindful
Absolutely.
Of the tax dollars. And
I'm 63 years old and not rich yet, so I'm thinking my chances of getting rich are pretty much done.
Okay. Well, one of the other overlapping issues, I'm going to put your political hat back on, that has sort of been seen, the frequent, in the last month or so, water main breaks in Seneca Falls. Obviously, you aren't the town supervisor of Seneca Falls, but you're a supervisor in Seneca Falls, and you're a resident of Seneca Falls. What has been your... when you've seen this sort of happen day after day, week after week, what's been your reaction to it?
Well, I think, I've talked to a lot of folks, and I think I'm, as well as a lot of other folks, are pretty aware of what's underneath the ground in Seneca Falls. I mean, it's old, very old infrastructure.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? Well, it means it becomes very delicate infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And we're doing some work on water towers. We're changing pressures. Old pipes don't like to see those types of activities. They don't like to see rapid change in pressures. And there is no blame here. Mm-hmm. I think our water department is following and adhering to procedures that they're doing the best job they can. Mm-hmm. I think they knew that this stuff was inevitable. We were going to see it. We're probably going to experience more of it. I know there are some plans to mitigate some of the water and sewer issues here in the next few years. Again, that's a big project for Seneca Falls, but it's in the works. But I think they've done a super job. I know Waterloo has been helping out, lending a hand mm-hmm. when they can. We can share water between the two communities. So I don't have any great fears about it, but it's kind of indicative, unfortunately, of what happened for many, many years, and that is that there was some neglect, some level. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these projects should have been addressed a long time ago, mm-hmm. And they weren't. So we have to deal with them now, but we'll get through it. Absolutely, I think our folks are doing a great job.
Now, speaking of water, at this past Tuesday's, I believe it was Environmental Affairs Committee meeting, a little bit of discussion was had about investing in protecting Keuka Lake.
Yeah, it wasn't specifically Keuka Lake, but as chairman of that committee, and we're in our budget season. Mm-hmm. So we have two methods for budgeting and paying for things in Seneca County, right? We either appropriate them, the various departments, they come to us with their requests, mm-hmm. And typically they're pretty accurate. They've been very good at really dialing those budgets in. And the other method is that we have a contingency fund, and if something comes up in the middle of the year and it's not budgeted, then you pull it from the contingency fund. The proper way is to budget for things, right? So in this event, I mean, Seneca County has a tremendous amount of shoreline and waterfront, and a lot of residents that live on it. We get a lot of property tax dollars from folks on those waterfronts. In the town of Varick, I think there was a study conducted by Mel Russo here at Seneca a number of years ago, and he determined that 70% of their property tax income came from folks that had lake frontage. It's not from all the folks that own all the farmland. Farmers don't traditionally pay a tremendous amount of taxes. It's the lakefront. So our lakes are very valuable for a lot of reasons. You know, there's over 100,000 people drinking water out of Seneca Lake. There probably could be more. I don't know the number. Pulling drinking water out of Keuka Lake. You know, when you consider Del Lago coming online, where they say 10,000 people every single day, which I have a hard time getting my head around that one. But and when people are walking around with a cocktail and some water in it, and they're drinking water in their hotel rooms, I mean that really ups that 100,000 to an awful lot more people drinking water out of our lakes.
Yep.
And there's nothing more precious. I mean, air and water are probably the two things you can't live without. So we got to protect it. And everybody, I hope, is aware. They should be aware of some of the strains and stresses on our Finger Lakes, all of the Finger Lakes the last few years. We have blue-green algae outbreaks, which produce toxins and can really be real significant issues. And we're seeing that in Seneca Lake in a couple areas. Owasco Lake's been plagued with that, and some of the other small lakes. This year, the EPA issued a release here a few weeks back about potential lead pollution into the south end of Keuka Lake from a swampy stream down in Lansing, where a hunt club or whatever shot clay targets for 100 years, and that lead shot sits in a swampy area. And it's not that there's anything intentional or on those folks' part, but it's just the nature of the beast that I guess the swamp and the lead it causes the lead to break down and potentially can leach into Keuka Lake if it's not. So there's some issues there. And hydrilla is not just a seaweed. I mean, people on hydrilla, it's just another seaweed. Hydrilla can turn a shallow lake literally into a parking lot. I mean, it will kill everything else in that lake. Fish will not exist in the lake. Other weeds won't exist in the lake. It covers the bottom. It covers the top. It's a terrible. It's probably one of the worst of the invasive water species. And now it's been found in Aurora, along the Aurora side of Keuka Lake, which means inevitably it's going to be found on the eastern shores of Keuka Lake. So we have all these issues. We also have a lot of runoff and nutrient loading is the term that is contributing to a lot of these issues, contributing to the blue-green algae. And we have a number of groups in the watershed of both Seneca and Keuka Lake that work very hard on protecting and monitoring the lakes. They're volunteers, but from time to time, those folks could use some seed money from a local government, in order to reach out to a bigger government, the state or the feds, to acquire some more money in the form of grants or whatever. So I just thought, getting back to your question, that it made sense in this budget season to appropriate. That means just to set aside a small amount of money, so if and when one of those requests might come before us, we might be able to assist.
Right.
Doesn't mean we're going to spend it. Doesn't mean, and it means that we as a board have the opportunity to take each and every one of those requests and evaluate them for their merits and make that decision. It's not a decision to spend. In this case, I asked for an appropriation of $25,000, and it would be up to us whether to spend it or not. If we don't spend it, it would just sit there and roll over to the next year. The city of Auburn appropriated $100,000 about a month or so ago for their Keuka County Water Quality Council or whatever they call it over there
Right.
for such purposes. And we also have issues with septic systems on the lake, and there's organizations that and programs out there to help folks mitigate some of these issues. But it takes sometimes it just takes a little seed money, and that's all this is. It's just hopefully
planning.
Hopefully we can help some other organizations get the bigger dollars to bring in and protect the lakes.
Now, before we get you out of here, the last time you were on this program, I believe we were discussing the Seneca Army Depot.
Yep.
Several months removed from that situation now. Are you satisfied? Are you happy with the way things are going out there? Do you like the direction that things are going?
I'm hearing some good stuff,
Right.
but I'm cautiously optimistic, right? I mean, I hope everything works out. I just read a small little. It's funny you say that because Dennis Money keeps a number of us kind of apprised of what's going on, and he was told by some folks who work at Western Ag, which are it's a company that's currently on the depot, that they've witnessed a bumper crop of young white deer this year. And knock on wood for that. I'm very thankful for that. And there's been some food lots that have been planted. I mean, things seem to be heading in the right direction. My understanding is Mr. Martin has done repairs. He's onto the fence, and he's upped patrols of the area. I think he's taken baby steps, and I can understand that. So, I'm hopefully optimistic. I certainly think it's in better hands with Mr. Martin than it was with the IDA. Because the IDA did little and nothing with the property for 15 years, and I think he's turning that around. So, yes.
That's good. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. Ran a little bit over a half hour, but that's okay. I think there's a lot of good information here. Certainly does. We'll be having you on again in the future,
All right.
Certainly. That's going to do it for us today. I'd like to thank Steve for stopping by and wish him the best of luck in the coming months on the county board. Inside the FLX airs Sundays at 7 p.m. on Time Warner Cable Channel 12. And, of course, the podcast is always available on iTunes, Stitcher, and the FingerLakes1.com app. For Steve Churchill, I'm Josh Durso, reminding you to join us next week on another edition of Inside the FLX.